Welcome to MegaBucks Radio. Conversations with successful entrepreneurs, sharing their tips and strategies for success. Real-world ideas that can put MegaBucks in your bank account. Here's your host, Nina Hershberger.
Welcome back to another episode of MegaBucks Marketing Radio. You know, preparing for a funeral may seem intimidating, but planning in advance allows you to decide on what you want. You know, funeral expenses can be expensive, particularly if you don't pre-plan. Too many people run through their life savings. I know my mother is in an assisted living, so improper planning could be a real issue. Planning and funding ahead of time is a significant thing to do to reduce the burden of your loved ones. It gives them peace of mind so they don't have to make the decisions. And then also, you know, it could be a financial burden for them if you haven't properly planned. So my guests today are a father and son team, Scott and Andrew Behan from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Love Colorado Springs. Went there several years ago. It's a beautiful area. Scott is a certified pre-planning consultant, and Andrew is a family service counselor. Between the two of them, they have 20-plus years experience speaking from the heart about advanced funeral planning. So welcome. It's an honor to have you both on the show.
Thank you, Nina. It's good to be back, actually. You and I have a long history together here.
We do have a long history. You know, this is such an important topic. You know, I just said I have an elderly mother. We put her in assisted living about 6 months ago. So boy, it's you know, I mean, we're thinking all of these kind of things, and everybody should be. But explain to me, Scott, why don't you kick it off? What is exactly advanced funeral planning?
Advanced funeral planning, also known as pre-planning or pre-need, is a simple process. It's not as scary as people think it is, but it should be part of everybody's estate planning. In simple terms, it's just sitting down, in our case, sitting down with us, having a conversation, talking about what you want, whether you want to be buried, whether you want to be cremated, do you have military service, do you have cemetery property, and really trying to put your mind at ease and give you some peace of mind as to discussing your options. Then the next step would be to document your wishes. So many people will use the term, my wife knows what I want, or my husband knows what I want. And often the time it's not the case. If it's not documented, chances are things will not go as you hoped. So having a conversation, documenting your wishes, and then some people will opt to fund the funeral if they choose to. They can pre-fund it. They're not obligated to do that. But conversation, documentation, and funding options is the basis of advanced funeral planning.
So it's all three of those. One thing I didn't mention is you're the managing partners of Rocky Mountain Providers. Does that mean you own a funeral home, or what do you do in that particular role?
That's a great question. Actually, Andrew and I are both, we work out of a funeral home, but as managing partners of Rocky Mountain Providers, we're actually a third-party marketer for insurance companies that fund funeral planning. So we currently represent 28 different funeral homes, or our team does. It's not just me and Andrew. We actually have a team of agents throughout Colorado and across some locations across the states. So it provides them an opportunity not just to operate out of one place. So as managing partners, we kind of oversee some things. We help funeral homes with their pre-need funeral planning.
You help their people, their customers.
We help their clients, yes. A lot of funeral homes, because they're so busy, especially in today's current environment, have been extremely busy that most of them have a pre-need department. So in essence, Andrew and I are not employees of the funeral home. However, we are representatives of the funeral home, and that's by invitation only. We can't represent every funeral home. So the funeral homes that we do represent, which are usually, in our case, are always the mom and pop funeral homes, we help them out by taking care of what they don't have the time to take care of.
Okay, that makes sense. So, Andrew, tell us how would somebody plan in advance? Tell me what that looks like.
Well, there's a couple different options. They can, we can provide a planning guide through email or phone or whatever, however they need to do that. But a lot of times they can call the funeral home and set up an appointment, or us directly and set up an appointment, and we can attend. We can go to their house, or even if they want to meet at the funeral home, and just sit down and have a conversation. I mean, let's be real. It's a conversation nobody wants to have, but it needs to be done at some point. But there's many different ways that you can reach out to us through email, or calling the funeral home, or calling us directly that we can have a conversation with. Dad, you could probably add on a little bit more to that than I can.
I like that. Dad usually calls me Scott. But like you said, the big thing is for us is we speak from the heart. We use a no pressure approach. Nobody should ever feel pressured into doing anything. But it is a vital step. And as Andrew pointed out, we can sit down, whether it be in a funeral home or in the comfort of your own home. That's an important portion of it, because this is all about them. It has nothing to do with me or Andrew or the funeral home itself. It has everything to do with them and their wishes. So making it a comfortable conversation, like you said, it's a conversation nobody wants to have, but it is a must-have conversation.
So what you're saying is I wouldn't have to go to the funeral home to do any of this. I could do it. You would just come to my own home.
Correct. A lot of people are more comfortable with that, especially even with the COVID environment. It gives people peace of mind, and rightly so. They need to know that they're in control of this. This is their choice, not ours. We are merely educators that are there to provide the information. And up to this point, and as we continue to see it, we never charge for our services. Now, you will pay for a funeral if you choose to do that, but our consultation, our planning guides, we never charge for our services. That's something that we believe that we're kind of paying it forward. And I say that because my father died suddenly 27 years ago, and that's how I got introduced to prearrangements. He died suddenly, Irish, Catholic, and in the process, when I got to make arrangements, he found out that he prepaid. I never heard of that, and it's one of the greatest gifts he ever gave me. So I'm still paying this through my father's legacy.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you're saying in this pre-planning guide that it must be, I haven't seen it, but there must be some questions and, like, do you want to be cremated or not cremated? Do you want to have a high-end casket? I mean, I'm trying to think of something you ought to be telling me.
Well, in the planning guide, a lot of the planning guide you have your vital statistics, which is basically your death certificate without date of death. So you kind of get all that processed for your family, so that they don't have to go through all the documents and try to figure out all the legal things for yourself. Also, there are definitions in there of things that need to be done. It also gives you your accounts and everything that needs to be closed, that needs to be done after somebody passes, as well as an estimate sheet that we can actually document your funeral arrangements, whether it's cremation, burial. We have all that in the planning guide to kind of ease the tension and take the burden off the family when that person does pass. They can bring that into the funeral home, and a lot of the paperwork's already started.
Do people wait until they're sick to do these things, or what's your recommendation? When should they do things?
Yes. Unfortunately, too many people wait until the situation is close or nearby. COVID has probably brought more people to realization that we're not immortal. And the earlier you can do this, just as you plan for anything else, we plan for weddings, we plan for high school graduations, college graduations, we plan for everything. The one certainty in life is that we all will pass. So whether someone decides to pay for this in advance or not, that's not our decision. But documenting your wishes should be. Quite often we get a lot of times, like I said, my wife knows what I want. Well, do you travel separately? Do you go on vacation in different cars? So if something, heaven forbid, happened to both of you one time, does the kids know? Funerals, unfortunately, bring out the best in people and also bring out the worst in people. We've seen it because, again, Andrew and I do work within the confines of a funeral home, so we hear the siblings fighting over, the decisions that they didn't know. I thought Mom wanted to be cremated. No, she wanted to be buried. So the planning guide does exactly what you said, Nina. It actually has a lot of the information in there. Do you want a casket? And the itemization, as Andrew pointed out, is we can map out everything you want, your memorial instructions, and some general reminders of what relatives do you want to be contacted at the time of need. Do you have life insurance? Do you have a will? Who did you need to be notified? It's all based in that planning guide, and that's a free, everybody should have a copy of that. And again, that's one thing we will provide for anybody that ever asks, but it is a vital tool to keep part of your overall estate documentation and planning.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so there's the documenting and the planning part, and then there is the funding part. So talk to me more about that.
We operate pre-need insurance. Andrew and I are insurance agents first and foremost. That's what people kind of have a misconception of what we do. The difference between us and quote-unquote a final expense insurance agent or a traditional life insurance agent is we speak funeral. We are certified, we're family certified, we're family service counselors. We understand funeral as opposed to just buying a $5,000 policy and saying, hey, this will take care of my final wishes. That's kind of walking into a funeral home with a blank check. So pre-need insurance is when you're associated with a funeral home like we are and our team is, we're associated with a funeral home, so we're authorized to use what they call the general price list, which is their pricing, their most current pricing sheet. So the funeral homes will actually guarantee, based on what we sit down and document and write out, they will guarantee those goods and services at the time of need. When someone passes, this is your wishes, this is what they will honor. The vantage point of using a pre-need insurance as opposed to using a traditional life insurance policy or a final expense policy is under this specialized insurance, we're locking in today's prices. For example, I purchased a cremation with memorial for myself. Obviously, we're having this conversation. I haven't used it yet, thank God. But at the same token, I paid $2,900 for a cremation with memorial, whereas the same, if I was to purchase it at today's rate, and I only bought it a few years back, would now be about $3,600 for what my wishes and documentations are. Based on how funerals are going to continue to grow, and cremation is the rising star of the program because those are continuing to go up, that same plan that I just talked about funding and locking in today's prices, when I'm 88, I'm currently 60, when I'm 88, it's expected to be about $16,000 for a cremation with memorial as I've written it based on 5% growth. I don't believe it'll ever get that high. However, it will continue to rise, and I don't care. I paid $2,900.
Well, yeah, but you went to funeral home A, but let's say you moved. Andrew took you to Massachusetts or someplace to live, in your later years. Does that follow you, or how does that work?
That's a great question. Go ahead, Andrew.
It does. Since it's an insurance policy, if you were to say you're in Colorado and you did, a pre-arrangement through a particular funeral home and you decide to move to, say, Massachusetts, your money is portable. Any funeral home can actually make the claim based off of that. Some will honor those prices, but not all the time. But the 100% portable should you move at all. Even if you say you happen to be on a vacation in Florida for some reason and you opted to be cremated and you had a cremation in place here in Colorado, that you can actually use that pre-arrangement out in Florida to another funeral home that will sometimes honor it or use some of those funds. If the funds are not completely filled, so say you just hypothetically you have $3,000 in a pre-need plan for a cremation with a memorial, and that funeral home that you didn't necessarily write the pre-need through, but they're making a claim is $5,000, then the family would pay the difference of $2,000. So in simple terms, yeah, the monies are 100% portable because it's an insurance policy. And the prices do vary around the different locations of the country. So hypothetically, as Andrew said, if you have a $3,000 policy and you pass in Florida and you only use $2,000 because they only require $2,000, the other $1,000, this is an important step, Nina,
the other $1,000 actually would go back to the second contingent beneficiary. The funeral home is paid first, and then the family or the estate will get the extra money. The funeral homes are only entitled to as their interest may appear. So, but on the other change, that, like I said, if it's $3,000, you have $3,000 in this particular plan, and whatever you choose in Massachusetts, in this case, is $4,000, then the family could be obligated to pay the difference. Because it's insurance, it does give you the portability and the flexibility. It also, that's the same answer we can give you that if the funeral home was to go out of business. Funeral homes, because they are businesses, do sell. So if they were going out to the business, the new funeral home that assumes that business they will honor those contracts as written.
Okay, what you're saying is a funeral home might close, but it never closes doors. They just sell. So your policy, so you don't have to worry so much about that.
They could, well, some funeral homes will close their doors. However, the next local funeral home in the area will assume them. And because it's insurance funded, not where you walked in and paid the funeral home directly under what they call their own funeral trust, it gives you the portability. The monies are yours. They're 100% portable, and they are protected. They're also protected against Medicaid for Medicaid spend-down purposes. That's another added advantage, and they're also protected against creditors. It's a specialized insurance.
So probably the Massachusetts example was not a good one, but Florida would be, or Arizona. So you guys are in a state that could be kind of cold at times, and so somebody gets to be a certain age, and they move to Florida. Is your recommendation then? So, and they went to Funeral Home A, bought the policy with you guys helping them, and moved to Florida. Would they transfer that before they passed away to make sure that it's fully funded, or how does that work?
That's, again, a great question, and that happens more often than not because we are a transit society. Whether we're going from Colorado to Florida, we are still very much a transit society. So our recommendation has been, if you're going from point A to point B, we always tell you, find a funeral home that you're comfortable with. Again, Andrew and I are representatives of mom-and-pop funeral homes, and that's not to speak ill of anybody else. But we like mom-and-pop funeral homes, and for our case, they're a little bit easier to work with. So you move to Florida, I would tell you to find out wherever you want. Say you went to Naples, go find a local funeral home, sit down with them, show them what you have, and then the question that you ask, will you honor this as written? Most funeral homes will, especially if you're dealing with cremation. Now, for example, if you, as you mentioned earlier, you have a high-end casket, caskets could be a little bit tricky, especially with the current supply chain that's going on right now. Even a hardwood casket is a little bit more difficult to get these days. So that will be a situation that happens at the time of need, but at the same token, get with the funeral home that you're there for, and then everything can be switched over.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. With your clients that you help do this planning, do you stay in touch with them, and every year you say, okay, is it time to review your plan, or is it a one and done?
Again, great question. It's a lot of times, unfortunately, it's a one and done. We have built relationships. It's a unique thing, as many families as we serviced over the years, and there have been thousands. We have built relationships. You can build a relationship with a handful of them. So periodically, if you lose a spouse, you both had the pre-arrangement, and you lose a spouse, that is one, it's an opportunity to reconnect. But at the same token, if the family does not, or if they decided to spend more than what they originally funded, usually the husband and wife has the same plan. So it's a great opportunity for us to review with her and see if they want to add more to their plan or adjust it accordingly. So that's not an uncommon practice, but unfortunately, with the amount of people that we deal with, we don't normally do the review as everybody does, because most people are pretty comfortable with the fact that they've done it pretty well the first time out. Andrew and I would say we're pretty accurate the first time out, but again, when you have kids coming to the table at the time of need and they want to spend more, that's not an uncommon practice on their behalf. It happens for two reasons. A, emotional overspending can kick in, and that's again, the family's choice, or as we always tell people, don't pre-fund your flowers. Let your family have some buy-in to the program.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. So this was a specialized insurance policy. Are all the policies, I mean, do you represent, you talked about the different funeral homes that you represent and work with, but did you tell me at the beginning that you work with different companies, insurance companies as well?
Yes, we use a handful of different insurance companies that are specifically designed for prearranged contracts. Each state has their own different requirements. We use some that meet different needs. We have ones that have what we call return of premium. We have other ones that will let you pay it off early, same as cash. So when Andrew and I sit down with you, part of our conversation is to present the funding options. We're going to present the funding options that's right for you. Let's be honest. We're insurance agents. We're commission people. But it is not our job to upsell you in every given turn. It's to make sure we operate within your budget, what's right for you. It's not an uncommon practice for someone, and I'm going to use cremation as an example. I went to get cremated with Memorial, but when we put together their, and just say it's a round number of $3,000, they cannot afford the premium payment. But the common denominator is what we would call a direct cremation. That may be about $1,600. Let's fund this. It's called building a foundation of a house. We'll fund the direct cremation, and then when your resources change, you can always add to the policies. So that gives somebody, the most important thing for this is getting it documented, having that conversation, documented, and picking a funding option that is right for you. Nobody should ever feel pressured to spend more than they can effectively afford.
So then that means it's not a single payment policy. There are payments then available as well.
Yes, you can write a check. You can single pay it, or you can do a multi-pay. We have our funding vehicles are designed to meet your specific needs. You have the choice. There's advantage to do one or the other. Some people don't like payments. They've already set money aside, or in some people's cases, they have money that they set aside for their final wishes, i.e. a certificate of deposit, which is really not a protective mechanism. They could choose to use that money at the time of renewal and purchase a single premium pre-need plan. So now the money is 100% protected, whereas the CD is not, or a savings account that they've set money aside is not protected. Ours are. They're protected from, again, Medicaid, and creditors.
Yeah, which is a real critical thing to say. Again, it goes back to that peace of mind.
Correct.
Are all you guys represent a handful of insurance carriers? Are the ones that you don't? You must have handpicked those. So are there different? Are all the plans the same, or is there anything that the people that are considering this ought to be looking out for?
Most of the plans are relatively the same. The vantage point is every insurance carrier, just as every quote-unquote vehicle out there, has its different features and benefits. The relationship that Andrew and I have had with the funeral homes, they have allowed us to pick and choose what we think is right. Part of that is there's a growth product that, because the funeral homes are guaranteeing these products as well, so they're entitled to a certain amount of growth on these plans. But the ease of making a claim, the ease and quickness of getting paid, a traditional life insurance usually can pay out in about 6 weeks or longer. Some may pay you sooner. Our plans will pay out within 24 to 48 hours of the claim, because some funeral homes require money up front first before any of your plans go into place. It gives the funeral home peace of mind to move forward. It gives the family the opportunity to start putting the wishes and everything, and this is at the need, when the time that they pass, everything goes into motion so much quicker. So the business of burial/cremation is already basically taken care of. It allows the family to start the grieving process that much sooner because they're not worried about how everything's going to get paid up front.
Yeah,
so yes,
makes sense.
we do have the luxury of picking and choosing.
Yeah. Let's go over some misconceptions of people. Scott, I know you were in the military, and so you have a real passion for the veterans and what they feel. Talk to us about, some of them think that they're going to be taken care of. Will they, and how should they be planning?
That is sadly one of the biggest misconceptions. Yes, I spent a lot of time in the Air Force, career Air Force. But the challenge is most people think, well, I was in the service or I have a disability, therefore it's paid for. My wife is 100% disabled from the United States Air Force, and she has a pre-need plan. Why? Because we're not entitled to the funeral expenses. We're entitled to burial plans. And that means that we can go to a national cemetery as long as we're honorably discharged. The veteran has to be honorably discharged, entitled to burial, a gravesite or a niche if you're being cremated, your burial flag, your military honors. That if you are retired, you get full military honors. If you did not retire but honorably discharged, you're entitled to a burial flag and a bugler or a flag presenter, a gravesite, opening and closing of the gravesite or niche, your marker, headstone. That's what you're entitled to if you want to go into a military cemetery. If you go into a private cemetery and you are ground buried, whether you bury your cremain ashes or a traditional burial, that you're entitled to a marker, headstone marker. You still get the other aspect of the flag and you can have a presenter, but as far as what you're entitled to, it's dealing with the cemetery. You can go to va.gov.benefits. Their website will actually explain what you're eligible for as a military veteran, whether you're fully retired or if you just served honorably.
Okay, so militaries, if you're going to be in a private one, they need it just as well, just as much. So often.
The private cemetery, if you go into a private cemetery, you're only really entitled to a marker. They're not entitled to the opening and closing or gravesite or the grave line or slash vault. Anything dealing with that cemetery is separate and above, but the marker you are entitled to.
And marker, you don't mean headstone. You mean just because my father was a veteran, and when he passed, it's just a little bronze plaque kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about?
That is, well, it could be one or the other. Different cemeteries have different requirements where they will allow you to have what they call an upright, which is a headstone, or a flat marker. And the family has the choice. If the cemetery only allows flats, in this case your father, he was entitled to a flat, that is a bronze marker plate. Whereas in some cemeteries, private cemeteries also have a section that they just kind of dedicate to the military. You still pay for the plot, you still pay for all that, but the marker just depends on the type of marker that is allowed at the cemetery.
Okay, so let's say that I'm going to choose cremation. Do I have any other funeral expenses, or is it just the cremation expense?
Andrew, you want to handle that one?
As far as the cremation expense, I mean, a lot of plans, it's going to cover, on a cremation plan, if you're doing a cremation with a memorial, that's going to cover the funeral home costs, such as them getting permits and doing everything that they have to do on their end. Usually transportation cost to get you to the funeral home, refrigeration cost, and cremation itself. A lot of times, too, they will add a basic temp urn, which are designed to go into niches should you choose to go to a niche. But there are other options of buying urns that, you may want to have more as a display or anything. But it also covers death certificates and, unfortunately, an estimated tax. But whatever you want for your cremation funeral services would be covered on these plans. If you're looking just more like a direct cremation, like you don't really want a service and stuff, still going to cover the funeral home cost of what their price is, again, with permits and everything that they have to do, transportation to there, refrigeration costs, cremation itself, and then the temporary urn, as well as added death certificates, depending on how many you need.
The bottom line is what you guys are saying is just plan. At least plan. But even more than that, just like Scott, you were talking about your father years ago, is what a gift that was. When my father passed away, they had pre-funded as well. And so we owed nothing. It was wrong. Tell me any other kind of misconceptions that you guys hear.
Oh, I'm never going to die is one.
Oh, wow. Well, like you say, COVID took care of that.
Yeah, I'm never going to die is a big one. I always tell people, let me know the formula, we'll bottle it, we'll be millionaires. So Social Security will pay for it. You know, that's a big fun one. And again, sadly, people are caught off guard. $255 is the current Social Security benefit, and that is paid back to your spouse, or it can be paid back to if you have a special needs child. But it doesn't go to the funeral home. It doesn't go to pay down a funeral expense, because you're dealing with our government. It takes time to get that, and the funeral homes will capture the money. So $255 is the current Social Security benefit.
I didn't even know there was a benefit. So you're saying at the end of life that the last check that somebody would get would be that $255.
If they're eligible to collect it. If you're not married, that money just stays with the government. It's not like, hey, well, we're going to send it to your estate. No, it doesn't work that way. Your death benefit with Social Security is $200, and which is sad. As much money as we've paid in over the years, that's all we're working for. But more importantly, people think that's all that's going to cover their final wishes, and it's not. Another fun favorite is my family knows what to do. You know, my wife knows what to do. Well, unless you travel separately in vacation, you know, take separate vehicles, separate trains, separate planes, whatever. What happens if the unfortunate happens and both of you pass at the same time and your kids are left trying to make that decision, or friends are left to make that decision? That's why it's so important to make sure the documentation is done. We sit down with families a lot, and it's amazing. That's why it's so important. And I go back to the very first step. Let's sit down and have a conversation. You'd be surprised how many times I've sat down with a husband and wife, and they look at each other with a deer in the headlight look, saying, I did not know you wanted to be buried, or I did not know you wanted to be cremation. They are on two separate pages. So that's our focus, both Andrew and I and our team, is let's start a conversation. We're not there to sell you anything. We're here to get that conversation so that you guys are on the same playing field, so that you do know. So don't leave it to chance that my family knows what I want, because, again, you may lose a spouse, and then dad's left. That's great. Now what? You know, so the kids will say, back to what I said before, oh, mom wanted this, or, you know, dad wanted that. No. And that's why so much fighting happens at the time of need.
The other thing is to add to that. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
To add to that, a lot of the times, just by even talking about whether you want to be cremated, where you're buried, I know it's a sensitive conversation, but it does take that emotional burden off the family at the time. The one thing that a lot of families do at the arrangement table is they pay out of guilt or regret that they didn't spend more time with that person, or they feel that they needed to have a huge funeral, and mom or dad or whoever it is may not have wanted something that big. They just wanted to have a simple thing, but people will overspend in the sense of guilt and emotional overspending. So again, having conversations, I can share stories, a lot of stories, but it is such a relief to a person to know that if something happens to me, I'm going to be taken care of and it's all paid for. The life insurances and everything, life insurances are not specifically designed to pay for funerals. They can be used, and as Scott said earlier, that, you know, funeral homes will charge and everything like that, but they're designed to help the living, you know, whoever they name as the beneficiary. But again, we're really just trying to prevent the emotional overspending and just having the knowledge going into something that most people don't want to deal with.
Yeah. And I like it that you guys will meet with them in their home. So even as sensitive as this is and uncomfortable as it is, at least we're not doing it in a funeral home, you know, looking at caskets. I mean, and so I think I mean, we're all, if you're smart, you have a power of attorney, a living will, or health power of attorney, any of those kind of things. So why not this?
And why not this? This is, of all the tools, I've worked with some financial strategists, and I'll even say this, and you know this, Nina, in my first book, Funeral Funding Made Simple. There's a shameless plug, isn't it? David Rockefeller Jr., I had the pleasure of visiting with him, and he said that was sound financial advice. And it's so many people, and it's, again, we'll hear some financial advisors will tell families not to do this. It's not a good investment. I didn't say it was an investment. It is a protective mechanism. We have an opportunity to help people protect and provide for their families. That's the major part of this. But going into that, it's all these financial advisors or life insurance agents and elder life attorneys, all their intentions are good, and they have solid information in their chosen profession. Chances are they may have never had to arrange a funeral before, and they're sure not sitting at an arrangement table at the time that their client passes. But you know who is? A lot of times it's me and Andrew, or the funeral home, obviously, that we're working with. That's why it's so difficult when we get all this good information. Someone on this call may say, hey, just send me some information, and we're happy to do that. The challenge is it's a piece of paper. We're giving you a book. Now what are you going to do with it? If you don't sit down and have somebody guide you through that process that knows what is required and not required, it's a piece of paper. You can download them on any given site, anywhere. You need a chosen professional to help you walk through. No different than when you were getting married and people use wedding planners. This is a vital, vital tool, and not everybody knows the ins and outs. A traditional life insurance agent, and again, I'm not here to bash them in any way, shape, or form. They're good at what they do. But as Andrew said, life insurance is designed for the living, not to arrange a funeral, especially when there's so many different moving parts that most people don't know. You shouldn't fix a roof when it starts to rain. You should not learn how to arrange a funeral the day you just lost somebody.
Yeah. Well, guys, I am looking at the clock, and we are out of time, but this was so useful. If somebody wanted that free planning guide that you've been talking about, can they get it from you? Where would they go?
Yes, I mean $9.95. No. Yeah, they're more than welcome to go to they can email us at info@RockyMountainProviders.org. info@RockyMountainProviders.org. Request a free digital planning guide. We'll be happy to send that to them. We're happy to answer any questions via email as well to get this started. Again, let's have a conversation that nobody wants to have.
And I assume the mountain in your name is spelled out. It's not MT or anything, right?
It is correct. It's Rocky Mountain Providers, everything spelled out, .org.
And it's .org and not .com. So, Scott and Andrew, this has been so useful. So, everybody needs this. Oftentimes in the podcast, I talk with business owners and we talk success and all that. But I ask you guys on this call because this is critical. It's, people need to have this. I need to have this. So thank you for joining me on today's call.
And we'll be happy to send you a free digital planning guide, Nina.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So until next time on MegaBucks Radio, remember, you are the only game changer.
Thank you for listening to MegaBucks Radio with Nina Hershberger. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or to listen to past episodes, visit MegaBucksRadio.com.